Imagine two of the greatest generals that Rome ever produced. Men whose names would be remembered for centuries and revered not only in their own time, but for posterity. On one side, Julius Caesar, a military and political leader who conquered territories and hearts. On the other, Pompey, the hero of so many battles, beloved by the Senate and feared by enemies in every corner of the Mediterranean. Their paths crossed in a moment of crisis that would define the course of the greatest power of antiquity, the Roman Republic. In this story, we will witness an unrelenting pursuit, ingenious sieges, surprising tactics, and acts of courage that shook the very foundations of Rome. When Caesar and Pompey collided, it wasn't just a personal power struggle. It was a decision about the political and cultural future of an entire empire. Throughout the following sections, we will dive into the campaign that culminated in the famous, and nearly fatal for Caesar, Battle of Dyrrachium. You will understand how flesh and blood men faced extreme hardships, harsh winters, scarce provisions, and of course, the constant fear of seeing their legions collapse. It will be a long, emotional journey filled with surprises. But before we plunge into this incredible story, make sure you're subscribed to our channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of our videos packed with historical curiosities about ancient Rome. Have you ever wondered how two men who shared victories and aspired to greatness ended up facing each other in a bloody civil war? Get ready to discover the interests and twists that led Caesar and Pompey to definitively break apart. Roma in war, the break between Caesar and Pompey. When Julius Caesar returned from his conquests in Gaul, he was no longer the young man thirsty for glory. He was now an experienced commander with popular fame and the support of the legions. However, the Roman Senate, influenced by Pompey, saw Caesar as a mortal threat to the balance of power in the Republic. Pompey, on his part, had always been a man who valued tradition and stability, victorious in several battles in the East and a figure of prestige with the Senate. He felt that Caesar's rising power could undermine the foundations of the old Republican order. Pompey began to view his former ally as a rival who needed to be contained at all costs. Caesar's famous crossing of the Rubicon, accompanied by the well-known phrase "Alea jacta est," the die is cast, was the official trigger for the civil war. Rome, once peaceful under the aegis of the so-called triumvirate, was now divided into two irreconcilable camps. On one side, Caesar's supporters, composed of veteran legions and much of the common people. On the other, Pompey's followers, with the Senate on their side and greater diplomatic influence in the provinces. The initial movements of the war were marked by urgency. Caesar advanced quickly, knowing that speed was on his side. Pompey abandoned Rome to gather forces in Greece, believing that in the east he would have more powerful resources. This beginning already demonstrated the nature of the conflict: strategy versus daring. Could Caesar face Pompey on equal terms without first securing his own rear? Discover how Spain became fundamental in the chess game that was Roman military politics. The race against time, the lightning campaign in Spain. Before pursuing Pompey in the east, Caesar knew that leaving enemy legions behind would be suicide. In Spain, there were still forces loyal to Pompey, led by generals Afranius and Petreius, two feared and experienced names. They controlled important supply routes that could have disrupted Caesar's plans if not neutralized. The journey to Spain was not easy. The provinces beyond the Pyrenees demanded careful logistics and high morale among the soldiers. At the height of his charisma, Caesar encouraged his troops with fiery speeches, promising glory and rewards. He understood that every day was crucial. As if Afranius and Petreius received reinforcements, the situation would become complicated. The Battle of Ilerda, near modern-day Lleida, Spain, was a key turning point. The mountainous and strategic terrain gave the Pompeian generals a defensive advantage. However, Caesar had developed an adaptable style of warfare, taking advantage of sieges, rapid maneuvers, and mobile fortifications to corner the enemy and undermine their supplies. The surrender of the Pompeian forces in Spain was not the result of a grand frontal attack, but rather of Caesar's brilliance in cutting off supply lines and isolating the troops. With no food and no route of escape, Afranius and Petreius had to surrender. In a calculated act of clemency, Caesar allowed them to return home, provided they did not take up arms against him again. Do you think that crossing the sea in the middle of winter, at the risk of storms, was recklessness or audacity? See how Caesar turned a dangerous maneuver into a surprise factor against Pompey. Defying the gods, the crossing of the Adriatic in winter. With Spain relatively under control, Caesar once again turned his attention to Pompey, who had consolidated his position in Greece. The crossing of the Adriatic Sea in the dead of winter was practically taboo for many commanders, as storms and freezing winds turned the journey into a game of Russian roulette. However, Caesar knew that time was not on his side. Every day, Pompey gathered more troops and secured more allies. Then, in a bold maneuver, he ordered his legions to head to Brundisium, modern-day Brindisi, Italy, to cross the Adriatic from there. The Pompeian fleet was still patrolling those waters, but they were caught by surprise. The impossible climatic conditions even made Pompey dismiss the possibility of Caesar risking navigation during that period. And it was precisely this factor that gave Caesar some breathing room. Even so, half of his forces remained stranded on the Italian coast, as it was too risky to take everyone at once. Caesar disembarked in Greece with reduced contingents, but eager to establish a secure base. This step, though risky, demonstrated the determination of a commander willing to do anything to win. What would happen if Caesar, with few troops, encountered Pompey entrenched in a well-fortified and well-supplied city? Let's see the magnitude of the challenge that Caesar faced in Dyrrachium. Pompey in Dyrrachium, the fortress of the Traditionalists. After disembarking, Caesar realized that he would need a secure port, but Pompey had already established himself in the region of Dyrrachium, a coastal city that was very well fortified. Access to the sea guaranteed Pompey constant supplies, eventual reinforcements, and naval dominance. Dyrrachium was located on the coast of what is now called Albania. Besides its high walls, its privileged geographical position provided multiple escape and supply routes. It was almost impossible to easily besiege it, and Pompey knew this. Even so, Caesar believed that he needed, in some way, to force Pompey into an open-field battle. He knew that his veteran legions were loyal and trusted his leadership, but numerically they were still inferior. If Pompey remained there indefinitely, Caesar's situation could become drastically complicated. The presence of influential senators alongside Pompey transformed Dyrrachium into a sort of improvised capital for the Roman traditionalists. More than just a military stronghold, the city became a symbol of resistance against Caesar's rebellion in the eyes of the Senate. Have you ever imagined yourself in a battle where the greatest weapon isn't the sword but rather the shovel and ingenuity? It's time to understand how the construction of fortifications became crucial. The War of Fortifications, siege, trenches, and tension. With Pompey sheltered behind the walls of Dyrrachium, Caesar decided to erect a gigantic system of fortifications around the city. His idea was simple in theory but complex in practice. To cut off the supply route and force Pompey to come out and fight. On one side, the trenches and earthen walls built by Caesar's engineers stretched for miles. Caesar's infantry took turns day and night erecting barricades, watchtowers, and deep ditches. On the other side, Pompey's men were also digging and constructing defenses to prevent Caesar from completely isolating them. This true war of engineering demanded patience and physical endurance. For every trench dug, there were countermeasures by Pompey. Meanwhile, the soldiers suffered from a lack of supplies, the cold, and an enemy that counterattacked at any sign of weakness on the front line. Are you enjoying this detailed view of how battles were not just about sword strikes, but also about brilliant strategies? Leave your like now, so we can continue bringing rich and engaging stories about the Roman Empire. But what happens when the siege begins to harm the attacker more than the defender? Let's find out how the tide can dramatically turn against Caesar. The hunger that kills soldiers. The siege turns against Caesar. Around Dyrrachium, Caesar's plan had one major weakness. While Pompey received supplies via the maritime route, Caesar's legions did not have the same privilege. The Pompeian naval surveillance made it difficult for reinforcements or food to arrive. With the prolongation of the siege works, even Caesar's own soldiers began to feel the effects of scarcity. Grain became scarce, horses fell ill from lack of fodder, and discontent started to spread among the ranks. Beyond hunger, morale was also at stake. When an army feels that it is stagnant, without the prospect of a quick victory, discipline can wane. Caesar was a charismatic leader who delivered encouraging speeches, reminding his troops of previous victories. But each day that passed without a win eroded the confidence of the legionaries. Meanwhile, Pompey gained time and strength. From his fortress, he knew that if he continued to resist, Caesar's weaknesses would grow exponentially. He just had to wait for the right moment to attack. If you believe that luck was always on Caesar's side, get ready. Here, we will see how Pompey nearly destroyed the great general with a single decisive blow. The fatal breach. Pompey strikes with fury. The opportunity Pompey had been waiting for finally arrived when one of his scouts identified a vulnerable point in Caesar's trench line. Some guard towers were fewer in number, leaving a section of the wall more susceptible to a mass attack. Pompey acted quickly and with precision. His elite troops launched themselves against Caesar's weak point, breaking through the defenses and dispersing the soldiers who were trying to hold out. It was a devastating blow, as it shattered the sense of invincibility that Caesar's men had. Amid the chaos, Caesar personally ran from one point on the battlefield to another, trying to reorganize his legionaries. With commanding shouts and, according to some historians, even using his red cloak to signal where defense lines should form, he attempted to stem the rout. But the damage was already done. Pompey's numerical superiority and the surprise attack forced Caesar to retreat. Many soldiers fell or fled in despair. It seemed that the great conqueror's luck had finally run out. How can a moment of doubt change the fate of a war? Let's find out why Pompey didn't annihilate Caesar when he seemed to have everything to win. The hesitation that saved Caesar. Pompey's victory at Dyrrachium would have been even more resounding if he had decided to pursue the fleeing legions. But perhaps fearing a trap, or believing that Caesar was already defeated, he retreated instead of advancing. This moment of hesitation was crucial. Caesar managed to gather his men and reorganize into a more favorable defensive position. It was a golden opportunity to avoid a complete massacre. Caesar's soldiers, though shaken, still recognized him as a distinguished leader. The agile way he responded to the attacks reinforced the admiration of many officers who regrouped around him to catch their breath. Pompey, on the other hand, came to be seen by some critics as hesitant at the final moment. That day in Dyrrachium could have ended the civil war in favor of the Senate, but Pompey's prudence prevented the final blow. Could one recover from such a humiliating defeat and return with full force? Let's see how Caesar transformed the retreat into a survival strategy. Retreat with honor, on the path to revenge. After narrowly escaping destruction, Caesar understood that remaining near Dyrrachium would be suicide. He then decided to conduct an organized retreat into the interior of Greece, where he hoped to regroup and possibly receive delayed reinforcements. What could have been complete chaos turned into a disciplined march, thanks to the deep respect his troops had for him. It wasn't the first time Caesar had been in trouble, and in many ways his men believed that he would always find a brilliant way out. Pompey, now more confident, followed Caesar, but with caution. He feared falling into a trap. At the same time, some factions within the Senate questioned why he hadn't pursued Caesar more vigorously at Dyrrachium, but Pompey remained cautious. Caesar's retreat shifted from humiliation to a beacon of hope for his legions. Despite the defeat, the fact that they were still alive and relatively organized fueled the belief that a rematch was coming. If you think the story ends here, get ready. The true battle that would seal Rome's future was still to come. Discover the prelude to Pharsalus. The shadow of Pharsalus. Rome's destiny is to come. The retreat into the interior of Greece was only the preparation for the great clash that was approaching. Caesar, even with the defeat in his baggage, did not abandon his strategy of seeking a decisive battle. He knew that, to survive, he would need to defeat Pompey in open combat. Pompey, for his part, was gathering more and more support. Many Roman nobles and eastern provinces were sending money and provisions, certain that this time the usurper would be annihilated. Pharsalus, a plain in Thessaly, would be the stage where both would lay down their destinies. For Caesar, retreat was not an option. He always believed that only a hard and definitive blow would end the civil war. And no matter how tired his troops were, they harbored an almost mythical trust in him. That trust, however, would be put to the ultimate test. At Pharsalus, a historic confrontation would determine not only who would command Rome, but also which. Ideals would prevail, the old senatorial guard or the political renewal that Caesar represented. And so we come to the end of this part of the story, in which the Battle of Dyrrachium nearly marked the end of Julius Caesar's career. We saw how a single moment of hesitation was decisive in allowing him to escape annihilation. However, a new and terrible battle was emerging on the horizon: Pharsalus. And as many historians like to say, that moment would definitively change Rome's destiny. So, if you enjoyed this journey back in time and want more fascinating stories about ancient Rome, subscribe to the channel, leave your like, and share this video with your friends. Your participation is essential for us to continue bringing incredible curiosities and events from antiquity. Thank you very much for watching, and until the next video, where we will explore even more behind the scenes of this civil war that changed the course of history.